Well, hello, friends. It is my great privilege to welcome you to the Trusted Leader Webcast. I'm Joseph Sojourner, and you can call me Sojo. I'll be your guide as we go on a journey with global trust expert David Horsager as we unpack the content of his just-released book, Trusted Leader. Our hope for today is simple, that you will learn the fundamentals of becoming a more trusted leader so that the organizations in which you lead can perform at their very best. Now, I know you didn't tune in to hear me, so without further ado, I'd like to welcome the main event, Mr. David Horsager. Now, David, I know that you're not new to this topic of trust, but why trusted leader and why now?
You know, when I go back to that original research almost 2 decades ago, I kept finding the real issue wasn't a leadership issue, it wasn't a sales issue, it wasn't a marketing issue, it wasn't even a diversity issue, it was always a trust issue. And now more than ever, trust matters. We keep seeing it come up. Trust affects the bottom line. It's always the root cause. It affects everything more than anything else. We also kept hearing, people think trust is something you either have or you don't. That's not true. You can actually actively build trust. That's our passion, helping people become more trusted, starting with ourselves.
David, I love your passion to help leaders build and rebuild trust. And leaders, that's why we're here today. It's time to jump in, so buckle up because we've got an incredible lineup of content for you today, and we want to encourage you to set this time aside to dig deep. David, any tips for the folks at home getting ready to experience this event?
I would say, first, be ready to shift thinking about trust. We can think we know it all. I know I did when I started that original research a couple decades ago. Trust is more complex than we might think at first. And secondly, there's a whole lot on trust. We've been researching this for 2 decades. We put out one of the biggest white papers on trust every year, trust and leadership, and find this new data. We've boiled all that down to a few of the most important things you can do tomorrow morning to become a more trusted leader.
All right, you heard the man, and we can do this, leaders. Now it's time to clear the stage so we can kick things off with the author of Trusted Leader himself, David Horsager.
The number one question everyone is asking about you is not, do I like you? The number one question everyone is asking about you, from your clients, colleagues, and customers to your spouse, partner, or friend, is, can I trust you? Back to our graduate work, my graduate work, and all the research we do out of the Institute over the last 2 decades, we keep finding everything of value is built on trust. A lack of trust is your biggest expense. And the problem for many leaders is they're not solving the real problem. They're not solving the root issue. In business, we look at leading versus lagging indicators, and trust is always the leading indicator. We think it's a sales issue. It's not. The reason I buy or not, unless it's a commodity, has something to do with trust. We think it's a leadership issue. It never is. Unless it's a dictator, the only reason I follow someone has something to do with trust. The only way to amplify a marketing message is increase trust in the message. The only way to increase learning in a classroom, you have to increase trust in the teacher, the content, or the psychological safety or trust of the room. You want more innovation? There's only one way. You have to increase trust in the team so people will share ideas and not be scared to. We have big diversity problems in our day, and the biggest Harvard Putnam study would show diversity on its own pits people against each other unless you increase trust. The only way to get the great research-based advantages of diversity, inclusion, equity, only one way. You have to increase trust. So, a lack of trust is the biggest expense you have. Everything of value is built on it. If you think trust doesn't affect the bottom line, you don't have to look at all my couple decades of research. You can just think about a lock. Why do I put a lock on anything? There's only one reason. I don't trust you. So what's that lack of trust cost? Well, you got to buy the lock. That's money. The biggest cost by far is time. Now I've got to open it every single time. Text someone you trust. How long does that take? Boop, you're done. Now try to text someone you don't trust. How long does that take? How are they going to take this? How are they going to take that? Forevermore. A lack of trust is your biggest cost. If you want to deal with the root issue, you have to deal with the trust issue. Quick infographic of my original research. Here it is. When I started this work almost 2 decades ago, I kept finding trust was the central driver. When we hit the trust lever, that's when we solved for sales, attrition, time to market. Output went up when trust went up. Suspicion and skepticism went down when trust went up. Stress went down. Innovation went up. Trust affects everything more than anything else. We have to take a bigger look at trust. And trust is more complex than you might think. We can think, it takes a long time to build trust. It might. But in a moment of crisis like 9/11 in America, complete strangers trust each other like that if they're running the same direction. We can think, transparency is trusted. It's the business word of the decade, isn't it? Transparency, vulnerability, that builds trust. But some of your kids are so transparent on social media, I don't trust them for a second because confidentiality is also trusted. The trusted leader has to be as transparent as they can while being as confidential as they ought. We can think just be confident. Confidence is trusted, right? Well, it can be, unless it leads to arrogance, which isn't trusted. We can think I'll just extend more trust to my team. That's the way to get the most out of them, and it often is until you extend too much. We have to think bigger about trust. A lack of trust is our biggest cost. Everything of value is built on it. We kept finding this in our annual study, global study, the Trust Outlook. The number one reason people want to work for an organization ahead of more pay, ahead of more autonomy, ahead of a more fun work environment with a ping pong table, they want to trust their leadership more than anything else. What about generations? We keep finding Gen X, millennials, they'll work longer hours, be a better team player. They'll even take a pay cut if they can work for people they trust. But before we get into ageism, every generation, boomers, traditionalists, X, Y, Z, everybody said exactly the same thing, plus or minus 1%. We think we have an engagement issue. We don't. The only way to increase engagement is trust. We think we have a net promoter score issue or a referral issue. The research keeps telling us the only way to increase referrals in an organization, increase that NPS score, is actually increase trust. So the question for you as leaders is, what's a lack of trust costing me as an individual? What's a lack of trust costing my organization? When I close the trust gap, I actually deal with the real issue. I'm not saying we should trust everyone. There are good reasons not to trust. I don't trust my flight to be on time. I've had experience, right? I don't trust that boy with my daughter. I've been a boy. I don't trust, people that say things they don't mean. Like, we don't trust people just because they say, just trust me. Because trust is not stated, trust is earned. I am not saying we trust everyone. I'm saying when you see trust as the leading indicator, when you see how trust affects the bottom line, when you focus on trust, you've actually focused on the real issue. So today, we want to think about how can we become most trusted, because when we do, we gain this great advantage we call the trust edge, this great advantage of being a trusted leader. Doesn't mean we trust everyone, but when we do, we have the chance to expand positive influence. Often speaking at live events, I'll be back at the back, and they'll have me signing books, and I'll have people come up to me and say, I love that trust stuff, Dave. That's good stuff. I believe in that stuff. My boss should have been here. My teenagers need this stuff. My spouse should have been here. They're not here today. You're here, and I'm here. If I was going to tell you why am I really so passionate about this work, yes, that grad work became important. Yes, seeing it work in pro sports teams and global governments dealing with corruption issues and companies, that made me even more passionate. But I'm most passionate because it changed me. It changed how I am as a dad. It changed how I am as a husband. I've had people say, People use this work to triple their sales. I've had people say it saved their marriage. There's no greater way to the best kind of influence than becoming a more trusted leader. When we come back, we're going to look at exactly how you become a trusted leader.
When you think of the world's most trusted organizations, who comes to mind? How about Southwest Airlines? A perpetual standout on Fortune's list of most admired companies in the world. Southwest is renowned for their legendary culture and customer service. It's appropriate then that our next speaker is the former Senior Vice President of Culture and Communications at Southwest Airlines and one of the architects of that trusted brand and culture. Please join me in welcoming Ginger Hardage.
Well, we have a special guest as a part of the Trusted Leader Webcast with me today. She was 25 years at Southwest. She was the Senior Vice President of Culture and Communications. And you know what we believe? We believe to build a great culture, it has to be built on trust. But welcome to this event. Thanks for being a part of it, Ginger Hardage.
Thank you, David. It's great to be with you. And you are on to something. The importance of trust in our organization. So delighted to be with you.
Well, thank you, Ginger. So tell us about this. You know, you created this legendary culture at Southwest Airlines, and it's become famous. And now, even since you've been retired, you've been a part of creating these amazing cultures, I would say high trust cultures, but amazing cultures in all your work. Tell us what you did at Southwest.
Well, I was lucky. Southwest had a great culture, and it had a great culture from the beginning due to Herb Kelleher, our founder, and Colleen Barrett, who became the president of Southwest Airlines. They were starting the airline, got it kicked off in 1971, and they did incredible things. So I was able to continue, and sometimes it's hard for organizations to continue a great legacy or a great culture after a transition of leadership. And so I encourage organizations to take that opportunity when they are going through a transition in their culture to really focus on that is a key opportunity, a transition of a leader. That's what we did at Southwest with Gary Kelly, who became the CEO in 2004, and continuing that legacy. And that's a turning point for many organizations, as well as the turning points we're seeing now that people are facing with the transition their organizations are facing after the pandemic. So those are terrific opportunities to again refocus on your culture.
How did you had this culture that was fun, that didn't take itself too seriously, but yet took safety and efficiency very seriously. But how did this become a consistent daily focus? How did, on a daily basis, how did this play out, this mix? How do you keep it?
Yeah, I like to say culture isn't a faucet that you can turn on and off. It's something you have to focus on at all points of the employee journey. So we believe at Unstoppable Cultures that culture starts before hiring. So it's so important that you're bringing the right level of people into your organization, that you're hiring tough and you're hiring people that match your values. So when you're interviewing them, you're asking them about how they might have expressed one of your values in a customer service situation, in a leadership situation, so that you're making sure you're bringing people who are already aligned with the kind of values that you believe in your organization. And then you hit upon that in all points of the employee journey, strong in onboarding, absolutely within their training, you continue to reinforce that, and then all the way to performance management. But then it just continues that drumbeat, and how you talk about how you're living your values. I'll give you one example. Every week, Gary Kelly, the CEO of Southwest Airlines, recorded a message to employees. He started that in 2004, and he's still doing it in 2021. In fact, he's amping up his communication because of the pandemic and talking more and more. But in each of those conversations with employees, he ended it with a shout out to employees, just to give an example with storytelling. And he would tell an example of maybe a letter that came from a customer that said, John in Albany did this incredible job of locating my lost teddy bear for my child, as an example. But those are the kinds of things you've got to just continue to model and reinforce the kind of behavior that you're looking for. So there's many, many things you do.
Mr. Soderquist, the only, I think, outside the family, billion-dollar person in the whole Walmart entity, said we built the culture on 7 a.m. meetings every Saturday, and we built it on saying the good, shouting the good, that appreciative inquiry. Here's the best of, so we get more of that. We talk more that's a part of who we are, and a lot of the negative tended to go away. Doesn't mean you don't have to deal with it. So I think you'd agree trust is important in the culture. What did you do? We talked about this a little before we were on here publicly, but what did you do? What are some specific things you did, the leadership team did, to build trust ongoing in the culture, in the senior leadership, in the direction?
Well, one of the things, we had real honest conversations, and for example, leadership, the top leadership of the company met every Tuesday. So we had a regular Tuesday meeting in which we met as a core team of about 8 and would discuss the issues that were important to the organization, but would spend much of Tuesday having people from throughout the organization coming in to present on a particular idea they might have, or how we were going to solve a particular problem that we had, working together as a team. And those, I think you have to be very careful. There's not retribution, and you're really focused on problem solving. So one of the areas that I led at the organization was emergency response. So in that situation, you're responding to something that didn't go correctly, and the honest conversations we would have after the situation was resolved about how we would go back, the adjustments we needed to make, and how we would go about solving a problem. So it has to be everyone pulling together and being very honest about what it is we have to face. So
you had a specific situation. I remember I wrote on it in my first book, The Trust Edge, about how you rebuilt trust. But that basically, because this accident kind of happened, it wasn't of ill will, but it happened, and people could have been harmed. They weren't, but largely it went right back to the next year. I think any other airline would have been flayed by the press, but because of the consistency, because of how you approached it, because of transparency, it seemed like, boom, right back on top as far as an organization. But can you tell me the other ways? You were not just head of culture, but communications for a long time. How did you rebuild trust? We know, not just saying, you don't just trust people just because they say, just trust me, right? We trust people that actually make and keep another commitment. But how, in those times of crisis or just honest mistake even, how did your leadership team rebuild it?
Right. Well, so for example, there might have been a computer outage that, companies encounter that. We definitely had that happen. And how you rebuild it, it happened that we were having a fair sale during a computer outage. So people were having difficulty getting to those fairs. So how you rebuild trust, you extend that fair sale so they're able to have the access to it. You don't cut them off. One of the best things I think Southwest ever did in terms of trust building was when all the other airlines started charging bag fees. So they were changing the business model, and Southwest was getting a lot of pressure from our financial investors to start charging fees, because you were seeing these huge fees that other airlines were getting. But we didn't feel that it was right that people had to pay to bring their luggage to travel. So that's where bags fly free came from. Southwest, that promise, that trust. We know you have to travel, and we're not going to charge you. Now, after the third, the fourth, or heavy bags, yes, there might be a fee. But for those first 2 bags, absolutely not. And that is, I think, a great example of building trust was looking at what the really leaning into the customer
Mm-hmm.
and our purpose as an airline. Going back to your purpose as an organization, our purpose was to connect people to what's important in their lives through friendly, reliable, and low-cost air travel. And you can't build those kind of relationships and gouge the customer.
So what about Ginger Hardage? You know, we talk about, I mean, great leaders tend to lead themselves well. Self-leadership is important. You know, if we're going to lead others, we're going to be this on the leadership team or leading big organizations. It seems like the great leaders, like you, are doing little things well. They're taking care of themselves physically, emotionally, their family. They're outside of maybe what work is. They're living in a certain way, some healthy way, high trust way. What do you have specific routines for self-leadership?
Well, you know, Southwest was a company, one of our sayings was that we take the business seriously, but we don't take ourselves seriously. And I think I would encourage anyone who's on a leadership team to look at that motto, not taking yourself too seriously, because honestly, think of teams we might have all been on in the past where everybody was so taking themselves so seriously that they weren't being human. And I think that's one of the things the pandemic may have helped in, as we all realize that, you know, there might be some, you know, my husband might jump in, you know, in the background on a meeting or something. We all have things going on in our lives, and focusing on that. So I would, I think the most important thing, that lesson I learned at Southwest, was the importance of humanity and focusing on the individual. Now, I think I was raised that way. I actually grew up in a grocery store. My family had a grocery store, so I learned that importance of taking care of the individual, focusing on the person who you're serving at that moment. And but more than anything, I think we carried that through at Southwest, and really looked at servant leaders and individuals who didn't take them, had a good perspective and balance. You have to have a good, not taking yourself too seriously, and having a great perspective and balance.
But I think that balance is interesting. I saw the data recently, actually, of how one of the big positives of the virtual world, the pandemic, was CEOs no longer is seen as in the ivory tower. They're like, you know, the cat jumps on the keyboard and the 4-year-old walks in their undies behind him, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, I can relate, right? In some other benefits, it seems like in Zoom meetings, often introverts are more willing to share, so you start to get ideas from everyone where you might not have other places. So there are positives to these things, right? So you keep now helping companies around the world with these unstoppable cultures. What's one of the first things you do when you go in and try to help an organization have a great culture?
Organizations say, we just want a better culture, but they really don't know what that might look like. So is it, I was dealing with one particular organization, and they were ignoring their high turnover. And the minute they started focusing on solving that problem, it solved a lot of other problems. If they're really making sure that they're just not having such rapid turnover, because they weren't ever able to keep people long enough to build that trust. And it was when you compared the expense of how much they were spending on recruiting and hiring and training, they definitely could spend more money on bringing the right people into the organization and reducing that turnover. So every organization's different. And I think that's the important thing, is realizing how your culture is different and what you're trying to focus on. And I think more and more companies in recent history are doing that, because it has been a firm focus for a lot of organizations of how are we going to survive. And so that's really focusing on what they're great at, and what's important in their organization. And I think we need to make sure that we don't return to any bad habits that we might have had. We may have lost some of those bad habits, whether it was being too bureaucratic. That's one of the things I'm seeing from a lot of organizations. They realized they were being far too bureaucratic and taking much longer to make decisions. And in this environment, they had to make decisions very quickly, and they're doing that.
Well, thank you. Any last word on how trust and culture collide from your perspective and your experience?
I encourage you to start with your employees, because if you make sure your employees are having the right level of information, as we talked about earlier, to act like owners, they're going to be able to take care of your customers. And your customers are going to be happy. They're going to keep coming back. Your shareholders are going to be happier, your stakeholders, and the whole life cycle just goes so much faster. So my wisdom would be to focus on your employees, giving them the right level of communication, training, and support so they can truly lead your organization.
That's fantastic. What a treat. We could talk all afternoon.
I know.
But thank you so much. It's certainly a high trust company, Southwest. And thank you for joining me,
David,
Ginger
thank you.
Hardage. Thank you for
Thank
the
you.
work you keep doing. And
Well, thank you for all you're doing to make organizations even healthier.
thank you.
David and Ginger, what a duo. As evidenced in this interview, trust really is at the heart of the healthiest organizations. We're about to dive into the meat of the content for the day, as David is about to walk us through the 8 pillars of trust. But before we learn about what it takes for someone to be trustworthy, I thought we'd mention a few people in the workplace who maybe don't have what it takes to be trusted. People that use Red Papyrus 24 as their default font in emails. People that reply all to company-wide emails. Or people that ask you to fax them something. Or people who are still on Zoom or even forget that they're on Zoom. And well, actually, this was probably gonna be all of us this past year, so I can't even really say that. But in all seriousness, we really believe that after this session, you'll be able to fully grasp what it takes to be a trustworthy leader. Speaking of which, I'm ready for David to walk us through the first 4 of the 8 pillars.
So if a lack of trust is really our biggest expense, if trust is always the root issue, how do we actually build it? In that original research and our ongoing work out of the Institute, our work on 6 continents, our work with pro sports teams and global governments, companies and entrepreneurs, 8 pillars, 8 research funnels kept showing up. The 8 pillars of trust. They're relatively co-equal. You might have to use or focus on different pillars at different times. So we're going to get started. Before we do, I want to mention something. When is your fastest opportunity to build trust? Is it first interaction? That's a good time. But your fastest opportunity is in crisis, change, recovery. Think of George W. Bush. When was he most trusted as president? When were his ratings the highest? The week after 9/11. After that tragedy, in the midst of that crisis, the way he responded right away, that built trust. You have a huge opportunity, if you have crisis, if you have change, to build trust faster than any other time. You have challenges, you have change, you have people throwing things in boardrooms and clients swearing at you and frustrated customers. You have a massive opportunity. How you deal with crisis and change can speed up your trust if you build these pillars. So let's get to them. The first pillar of the greatest leaders and organizations of all time, the first pillar of trust, clarity. What did we find? People trust the clear, and they mistrust or distrust the ambiguous or the overly complex. Whenever we overcomplexify something beyond what is needed, we lose clarity, which always loses trust. And this is a challenge for marketing companies, strategic planning companies. I mean, it takes work to be clear. We could talk about clarity all day long. So I picked 3 quick ideas you can use to become more clear and a more trusted leader. People trust the clear, and they mistrust or distrust the ambiguous. First idea, set one clear priority. It's still important to have a vision. It's still important to have a clear mission. But especially in times of change, if you can pull down to one clear, push forward priority, it can change everything. I can remember at the beginning of the pandemic, being privileged to be in a boardroom with a leadership team and watching the senior leader say, in this time, we're letting everything else go and we're pulling it down to this one key priority. This is our core focus, and that team made it through the pandemic in an industry that almost didn't. Pulling it down to one priority in change and shortening the time frame. If your priority is a goal for the year, that's too long in change. In fact, I had the privilege of being on a call with General Stanley McChrystal. You remember he was the commander of the NATO joint forces when Afghanistan was when the war for Afghanistan was taking a turn for the worst. He was put in charge. They kept not having the right intel. They kept having all these struggles. He said, we got to stop this. And he set a daily meeting with about 2,200 military members from across North Africa, Europe, even parts of Asia. In that 30 minutes, they shared the newest intel that they could find from that 24 hours, and they set a daily priority. If you have change, pull it down, shorten the time frame, and focus on one main priority if you would like alignment and clarity that leads to trust. One idea, one priority. Second idea. Now this second idea, this idea, we've had people say it's tripled their sales, but I can get personal. This idea might seem simple at first. It's not. This idea is how I lost 52 pounds in 5.5 months in 2011, and really how I've kept that weight off for about a decade. So it's personal to me. This idea is the 3 questions that actually drive strategic clarity. Now, I'm not saying the why isn't important. The why is a good question. The why gives us purpose. The why helps us, get motivated and unified on an idea. There's plenty out there about the why, and it's great to have a why and purpose. You won't last 10 days on a project without a strong why, but that is not the question that takes an idea to an action. You might like the who, get the right who's on the bus. That's a great idea. I want to have the right who's in the right spots. And yet, I see buses with people and teams with great whys singing about it and great people partying that aren't taking ideas to actions like they could. The 3 questions, the 3 most overlooked questions that actually give hope, that actually take an idea to an action. Try to listen as if for the first time. Number 1 question, how? How are we going to get there? How are we going to do that? The second question is way more important. It is, how? And the most important question of all is, how? You've got to get used to asking how at least 3 times. It might take 7. How are we going to do that? Okay, then how are we going to do that? Okay, then how are we going to do that? Not more hows, but drill down on hows until you can act on it today or tomorrow. That is the key. I've worked with senior leadership teams. I still remember this day. We did a whole day on trust, and finally I talked to this is one of the biggest healthcare organizations in North America. We're at a private location. We got the top 100 people there, and the CEO stands up, and I said, after all this work on trust, I said, what do you really want? What's the change? What do we need to focus on first? What do you really hope for? And that senior leader, CEO, happened to be a gentleman, stood up and said, we need a better culture. We're dying. We're losing HCAP funding. We're losing patients. We need to do something. We need a better culture. I said, great. How do you think you could start to have a better culture? He said, well, we think that first pillar is where we should start, clarity. We're going to be more clear. I said, great. How are you going to start to be more clear? He said, we'll communicate more. Do I trust him? Not yet. How are you going to communicate more? We're going to hold each other accountable. Do I trust him? Not yet. I go into organizations and they have accountability as a value, and I ask them how they hold people accountable here, and they often say, accountability stuff? They don't know. We asked how 7 more times. We asked how with every senior leader. And 7 years later, that organization that you would know said that was the tipping point when they each got clear about something they could do starting today or tomorrow. We've used this with global governments and some of the biggest companies in the world, and many people start out saying, we have 52 rocks, we have too many priorities, there's no way we could do that, and they always, always, always can. How? You can always do it. Let's look at me. I started asking people, I had a strong enough why on losing weight. I had to do something about it. And so I started asking people that you fly on planes and get shuttled to banquets and these kind of things, kind of have this certain lifestyle, consultants and whatnot. And I said, anybody I saw fit on the road, how do you stay so fit while traveling and doing all this? How do you do it? I got the same answer around the world. 4 words. Just eat less, exercise more. That was not clear enough for me. So I said, how do you do it? 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 And by asking how, I came to a few things I could do starting today or tomorrow. I'll give you just one idea. I still remember this doctor, 80 years old, happened to be a gentleman, came up, I still remember the left side of the stage, came up to me and he said, and by the way, he was fit as could be at 80. I thought, I can learn something from this guy. He said, David, I don't know if you'll do this, but it's an idea. Most men in America, if they just wouldn't drink their calories, they'd lose 30 to 50 pounds in 1 year. I started thinking about it. I get on a plane, I often order a Coke. 2 Cokes is a meal, bad calories, he said. You sit next to me on the plane today, you'll know. I almost never order anything with a calorie, but for 6 months I made a commitment. I'm not going to drink a calorie. My final how? Look at it. If there's calories in it, I can't drink it. It's a final how that I could apply today or tomorrow. How? Now you got to do things you'll do. Some of you wouldn't do this. If someone said I can never have ice cream again, it's not happening. But you have to how it until you can apply it today or tomorrow. That final how actually gives hope because you'll actually start to apply it. Oh, I've got a how. You're not going to solve everything, but you're going to solve something. And you have to go backwards on that how. You might say, I'm going to read more. Unless you how that until you have a book on the nightstand, you're not going to read anything. Oh, I'm going to sell more. Okay, how are you going to do that? I'm going to make more calls. How are you going to do that? I'm going to get a list. Okay, how are you going to do that? By 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, I'm going to pull out a list. Because many people say they're going to make more calls. They get to the time for calls, and they never made the list. So they don't do anything. We want a more appreciative culture. How are you going to do that? Well, we're going to be nice. How are you going to do that? We're going to appreciate people more. How are you going to do that? We're going to write notes. I still don't trust you until you tell me. I'm going to write a note every day by 9 a.m. for the next 90 days. That's something I'm going to apply today or tomorrow. By the way, a final how always has a who, when, and where if needed. Who, if it's me, I know it's me. Where? I'm going to work out tomorrow morning. If I don't know that I'm going to the gym or running out the door, I'll do neither. If I have a choice. If I don't know when, 5:30 in the morning, I'm not doing it. And when you do this on teams to solve challenges, you have to have a final who. Remember, co-leadership is terrible. Collaborative leadership is excellent. What does the research say? If you have more than one person on a final task, you have 50% less chance of it ever getting done. You have to collaborate. But there has to be one person, one place, one time on a final how. How? Everything can be changed a little bit that can make a huge difference when you how it. That's the second idea. Third idea. So when I took over or had a significant leadership role in the first organization that I had leadership in, I was in my 20s. Most of my staff was older than me. I wasn't getting what I wanted. I started thinking, what is the problem? It's probably me. And it was. Finally, I got absolutely clear about what I wanted and what I thought our organization needed, and that's what I started to get back. I came up with a little idea in those days, and it's helped me be a little more clear ever since. You can see many of the ideas I share, even though they first came from research, they're very simple because I learned I won't act on them unless they're simple and I can use them tomorrow morning. I call it ODC, not OCD, ODC. If I'm asking for something from someone, I want to make sure I've been absolutely clear about the outcome I hope for. This is what we hope for. This is not micromanaging the way they get there. You've hired great people, but what's the outcome? What's the purpose? What's the big why of this project? Getting clear about that outcome takes a whole lot of frustration out of the project. The D is deadline. Did you give a clear deadline? Many leaders, even managers, they don't share a deadline because they're afraid that will create conflict, when in fact not giving a deadline will always create conflict. You might not know the final deadline, but don't say, hey, can I see this pretty soon? Say, hey, can we take a look at this Friday at 10 a.m. just to kind of see where we're at on it or see if we made it to the next metric? A deadline. The C is clarifiers. Did you leave room? Say, are you clear about that? All right, do you want to share back to me so we know we're on the same page about this? Just leave a little space for clarifiers so they can ask questions, so you can see that you have a mutual understanding about the outcome and the deadline. Simple little process, ODC. Sometimes the simplest processes are the most powerful. So, 3 ideas under clarity: narrow and shorten the time frame of a core priority, especially in change. Number 2, how. How is the key word that takes an idea to an action. And finally, when you're communicating with your team, ODC. Make sure you're clear about that outcome, a deadline, and space for clarifying questions. Second pillar of the greatest leaders and organizations of all time. The second pillar of trust is compassion. We trust those that care beyond themselves. This is why in our global study every year we ask, who do you trust the most? It's not the Pope or Oprah, the most trusted person in the world to the most people is always mom. We could learn something from mom. Most moms will sacrifice. They'll put salve in that ugly wound. They'll help on that science project till midnight. Mom is most trusted because of partly her compassion. We trust those that care beyond themselves. How do we show care in the workplace? How do we show this compassion pillar? Well, we found the laws of compassion are the core ways we show care in the workplace. L stands for listen, really listen. The A stands for appreciate. Notice people, appreciate them. We're going to come back to that one. The W stands for wake up and be present. I love Dr. Francis Fry's new work out of Harvard that found you cannot build trust or empathy, or you have a very hard time even in the presence of a cell phone. If you can't be present, you want to be different today as a leader, be present. Shut the laptop. Look at someone. The great Maya Angelou said, no one remembers what you said. They don't remember what you did. They only remember how you made them feel. Wake up and be present. The S stands for serve selflessly. Let's go back to one of them, the A. We keep finding in the research, Gallup found the same thing, the number one reason people leave an organization is not being noted for notable work or appreciated for work done. I'm not saying appreciate everyone. I can still remember my son, Isaiah, 10 years old. He came running home. He went right by me, he had a trophy in his hand. I thought, oh, he must be excited. Something happened. As he went by me, he just threw the trophy in the garbage and kept running. And I said, hey, Isaiah, what happened today at school? What happened? He said, oh, Dad, don't worry about that one. They gave one of those to every kid. I didn't earn that one. You're the coolest kid on the planet, dude. I am saying there are people around you doing great things. Notice them. Appreciate them. And you can do this up, down, and sideways. Leaders at the top are often not appreciated. Remember, my wise older brother, the economist, says, we're in a more critical world than we've ever been in without the ability to critically think. You can appreciate and change relationships up, down, and sideways. Everyone needs it. One effective way to appreciate, we call it the SPA method. When I want to appreciate someone, I want to think, have I SPA'd them? S, specific. Specificity breeds credibility. It's okay to have an awards banquet and give out plaques like you always do. It is better to add in specificity. Instead of even saying, good job, saying, when you did that, that made a huge difference. Thanks for that contribution. More effective. Let's say we went to your house for that big party. Boy, you did an amazing job. That was fun. And what did some people say? I had so much fun at the party. This was so great. I had such a great time. And yummy food. It was so fun. But somebody said, you're an amazing hostess. Thanks for the great party. And who do you remember? That one. Because they made it specifically about you. Specific. The P stands for personalize it. Personalize it if you can. This can be done with a note. This can be done with a gift. I can still remember doing something for one of the pro sports teams, and they sent me a gift. And it doesn't have to be amazing or nice or whatever, but this little gift had something to do with fly fishing. Because they got to know me enough to know I love to fly fish. I'll never forget that gift, just because they personalized it just a little bit. The A stands for authentic. We can smell inauthenticity miles away. If you can't appreciate authentically, you're going to have a huge, huge problem. So, lots of compassion. Listen, appreciate, wake up, be present, serve selflessly. One way to show our appreciation is be specific. Personalize it. Make sure it's authentic. One more thought on this pillar. There's so much we could say about each of these pillars. But when I started speaking a lot about 20 years ago, it was before we had the 4 kids. My wife Lisa traveled with me almost all the time, and I was scared to death. I can still remember. I'd be backstage, and you got 1,000 people out there through the curtain. I would have stomach aches. Sometimes I would have I was nervous and scared to death. And my wife, every time, before I'd go on stage, David, stop worrying about the research. Stop worrying about this. And just love them. They can tell when you love them. I can still remember the first time I went to a kind of, it was corruption issues. I was meeting the president of this country in another continent, and we've got 3,000 people there, and the vice president's here, and the president's there, and there's just machine guns all around us, and I'm supposed to get up and talk on stage to these folks on trust, and my wife could tell I was nervous, and she was with me at the banquet, and she just squeezed my hand. Just love them. They can tell when you love them. I can remember going in one of the biggest companies in the world with the top 10 folks with a massive problem in a lockdown situation. And my wife texted me before we went through the gates. Just love them. They can tell when you love them. It's the same with you. People in this world, I don't care how tough they look. Some of the toughest leaders I've worked with, they just need you to love them a little bit. One of the things we ask in our company is that loving to our clients? Is that loving to our employees? Is that the loving thing to do? Do not underestimate the power of this pillar. Do not think the compassion pillar is some mamby-pamby soft pillar, because it affects everything, including the bottom line. The third pillar of the greatest leaders and organizations of all time. The third pillar of trust. I know there's C words, and you think, oh, is this some motivational stuff? 8 C's. They all came out of research funnels, and they all stand for a research funnel, and for clarity, they are C's. But this is a true word. You can imagine, of course, character is going to be a part of trust, and you'll see soon it's not everything, but it's something. Leaders that had this pillar were defined by this idea that they did what was right over what was easy. In America, we often say to our teenagers, you should have fun. They're going out with their friends, they're going to the ball game, they're going to the mall. Have fun, just have fun. Did our parents say? My parents didn't say that. They said, be good. Mom might have said, be careful. Dad said, be good, be safe, or be home by. It always start with be. We got a joke in our family. I never say have fun. I say be good, because what do we learn? The more we be good, the more fun we have. I love the Kelly research on this that found the more you seek pleasure for pleasure's sake, the less you ever have. Think about this. 10 scoops of ice cream right here. I love ice cream. I think I'll eat it all. Afterwards, do I feel better or worse? Worse. Over here, I got to go do research or I got to work out. I do that thing I do not feel like doing that I ought to do. After I do that thing I ought to do I feel better or worse? I feel better. It's the work of life to do what's right over what's easy. Now, Kelly wouldn't say, don't have fun, but he would say, seek satisfaction, not pleasure. 2 scoops of ice cream, no problem. 10 scoops is a problem. If you seek pleasure for pleasure's sake in any area of life, physically, financially, sexually, you will always hurt someone and yourself. 3 quick questions to consider about character for leaders. Number 1, would you follow you? Would you follow you? Some of the leaders I work with, they're way more worried about their image to people they care nothing about than who they are to those closest to them. I want to be a hero at home. I want to be a hero among my friends. The trusted leader is most respected and loved by those closest to him or her, not those furthest away. Second question, do you have decision-making values? We've worked through this process with so many leaders. Defining decision-making, not values in life, not my faith, my family, my friendships. I mean values that you will make every decision by, because when you have decision-making values, decisions get easier and they get quicker, and you're not pulled off of character. We set a set of decision-making values for our family. I still remember this. Back years ago, when one of our decision-making values is be generous, and our oldest at the time, 5 years old, said, yeah, our values be generous, right? And we were going to trade in a vehicle, a Suburban it happened to be, and we knew someone from a church that actually needed one, and because our daughter held us to generosity, we ended up giving it to this family, not because, we were doing. So when you have those values out there, decision-making values as a leader, you tend to live by them more consistently. Define 3 to 5 values you can make every decision by. Another question for leaders. Is there any way in your organization that you incentivize against the character you want to see? I see this all the time. Sales incentive programs that actually incentivize against the character they say they stand for. I mean, this is some of the problems with corruption issues around the world. We'll go and we'll see this big problem, and they're in fact incentivized against having the character the country says they actually want to have. Until they change the incentives of the country or the culture, corruption, bribery, and all of these things are not going to go away. But every year at your annual planning, one of your questions ought to be, is there any way we're starting to incentivize against the character we say we want to have? 4th pillar of the greatest leaders and organizations of all time. The 4th pillar of trust, and you can see right now, and I will tell you, I'm not perfect at any of these that I'm teaching. I just know they're true from the research and work on 6 continents. I'm not perfect at any of them, but we need to keep pressing into them and building them if we want to be trusted leaders that influence positive outcomes. The 4th pillar is competency. Well, you can see that character is important. You can see that compassion is important. I might even trust you to take my kids to the ball game because you have compassion, you have character. That does not mean I will trust you to give me a root canal because of competency. You've got to stay fresh and relevant and capable. You've got to stay competent in the area you want to be trusted. You've got to keep getting, if you're still selling the way you were 20 years ago, I don't trust you. If you're leading the same way you were 10 years ago, I don't trust you. If you're teaching the same way you were 5 years ago, I probably don't trust you. Because we have to keep getting better. We have to keep sharpening ourselves. There are several companies winning on training and development, and almost in our annual global study, almost 80% of people said they would trust their leadership and their organization more if they were more equipped in personal and leadership development, if they were more trained. You look at the Container Store. It's not this exciting industry, but they are winning against the competition. The CEO said, where most frontline employees in our industry get about 8 hours of training, in our store, they get 200 hours we can take one employee when we've hired right and turn them into 3. And they're winning. Let's take food franchises. Average per store revenue of a Taco Bell last year, about $460,000. Let's go up the food chain. How about a KFC? About $1.1 million. Let's get up to the big ones. Burger King, $1.5 million. But there's 2 big ones. McDonald's and Panera. Average per store revenue, about $2.5 million. Except for one. They work less hours, and they don't even work on Sundays. The average per store revenue annually of a Chick-fil-A is $4.4 million. Whatever your stance on Chick-fil-A, we can learn something here. $4.4 million. Why? As the CEO says, it is just chicken. But the way they do it's different. The way you feel is different. Not the way they do the chicken so much as the way you feel, because they're trained. Frontline at McDonald's, frontline at Chick-fil-A, it's about the same people. But you think these over at Chick-fil-A just came out of the womb saying, my pleasure? No, they were trained. They were equipped. You think the bathrooms are just clean at Chick-fil-A compared to everybody else because they happen? No, they were trained. They were equipped. You got to equip your people. And you might have to start with yourself. Great leaders, we know, are great learners. It's a crazy world today. Last year, I believe it was last year, the average number of books an American reads in their lifetime after their formal education. Remember, the great late Charlie Jones said, you're going to be exactly the same in 5 years as you are today, except for the books you read, the people you hang around. So I know there are other ways to get trained and equipped, but usually a good book is more thoughtful than just whatever you're watching on YouTube and comes up. And yet, the average number of books an American reads in their lifetime after their formal education, whether that ended at a high school degree or a PhD, average number of books, think about it in your head for a second. How many? Average? 1. What does this mean? It means most people are reading 0 because you're reading 100. My brother reads 52 a year, 1 every week. This, as you can imagine, it's a great time to be an author, right? This putting great input in input always leads to output. It matters. The average annual hours watched of an American every year, not in their lifetime, average annual intake of kind of floofy screen time, right? Just kind of, not your emails, but just fun videos and whatever, screen time, average annually for an American is, you got it, 1,287 hours. You've got to take charge of becoming competent. There's a truth in every science. In business, we say it this way: input leads to output. First law of thermodynamics, the great German physicist found the energy you put in is exactly the same as the energy you get out. You can think about it in everything. Physiologically, eat a bad bowl of chili. Input leads to output, right? You think of it, any farming or theology, you reap what you sow. Basic psychology says the same thing. You remember the first day of class? Thoughts that go in lead to desires, which lead to actions. It always starts here. Input leads to output, physically, mentally, emotionally. You gotta look at your input. What are you putting in to be a great leader? Podcasts, books, masterminds, accountability groups. What are you putting in? It matters. Here's one quick idea under this pillar to increase your competency. Several leaders I work with, they'll see a big problem. They'll have a big problem. Maybe you've had a big problem. How much of that problem do you know something about? How much of it could you solve on your own? Well, this little sliver is actually pretty generous. And how much do others around you know? Well, maybe this much. And how much is unknown to all? Well, that's a lot. But what do we find? We found when people are willing to be a little bit humble and think, what's known by others? And they make a list, maybe 10 people strong. Like, who's dealt with this issue before? Where could I Google this? What other avenues do I have? Instead of just trying to do leadership on their own, they're thinking, who else do I know that knows anything about a problem like this? And just in that little black area, just by reaching out to others, they gain the competency to solve the problem. So here's where we are. We've got a case for trust, got an 8-pillar framework. 4 of those pillars. When we come back, we'll go to pillar number 5.
Thank you, David, for once again bringing the heat. Our next special guest's actual job was assessing someone's trustworthiness, whether they were a terrorist or an ally. Robin Dreeke is a retired FBI special agent and former chief of the FBI Counterintelligence Behavioral Analysis Program. Robin has taken his life's work of recruiting spies and built a framework for developing a culture of trust. From military leader to spy catcher to behavioral analysis expert, I'm so excited for his next stop, the Trusted Leader Webcast stage.
Robin, we're so thrilled to have you on the Trusted Leader Webcast. Thanks so much for being here.
It is such an honor to be here, and I just love the title to begin with, the Trusted Leader Webcast. There is nothing better and more important in the world.
Well, you've had quite a history from U.S. Naval Academy to FBI Special Agent. What does the FBI think about trust?
Probably depends on the individual you ask on any given day. but in general, you know, and with my background as a spy recruiter and running our behavioral team, you'd think that, you know, it's all about manipulation and subterfuge and deception and pretext calls and all the things you generally see on TV. But when you actually take that step back and think about it, if someone is willing to put their entire life, their family's lives, and their future in your hands to use manipulation, it's never going to work. It's all based on trust. And so all my team did and all I did every single day was strategize trust. Strategize, how do you have a healthy engagement with another human being where ultimately all you're trying to do is identify their priorities, needs, wants, dreams, and aspirations, which we're all hardwired to seek, and offer them resources in terms of those things. And so that easily translates into absolutely everything in our lives.
You know, especially in law enforcement, you hear they're the least trusting in the world because they're lied to 1,000 times a day. I didn't do that. I didn't do that. I didn't do that. How do you actually see where there is trust and where there is something that's not worthy of trust?
You know, you got to do what I was so bad at most of my life, and that is overcome yourself. So if you really learn how to focus on other people, and, you know, as the old folks say, you know, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, you know, and if you can at least do that, you know, listen twice as much as you talk, you'll be better off. And so what I'm always trying to do is I'm always trying to focus wholeheartedly on understanding and predicting the behavior of other people. So I'm always looking at these 6 signs. I'm looking at a sign of vesting, you know, through their actions, words, and deeds. Are they demonstrating that they see our futures tied together and that they're commingled? Are they using signs of reliability, you know, so they can actually do what they say they're going to do and have the tenacity to follow through on it? I'm looking for signs of longevity. So you're looking for, are they having signs of long relationships? I'm looking for language, and language is the real one you can really pay attention early on. So people that are using great language are demonstrating that they value you and want to affiliate you. So what they're using is they're seeking your thoughts and opinions rather than sharing theirs. They're talking in terms of your priorities rather than sharing theirs. They're validating you without judging you. In other words, they're having non-judgmental curiosity about you. And finally, they're empowering you with choices. Because when you add one of those 4 things in everything you say and do, you're demonstrating value to the other person. We're having the pleasure centers and the, neuroreceptors firing in the brain. And hopefully, most importantly, for trust, we're not going for the short term. We're going for the serotonin and oxytocin. So we got long-term potential for relationships and partnerships. And finally, what I'm looking for is stability, great emotional stability. So when times get stressed and emotional hijacking takes place, so to maintain great cognitive thought. Now, when I package all that together, especially listening to the language, the other thing I'm going to be paying attention to is nonverbal behavior. Are they demonstrating high comfort nonverbal behavior when saying all these great things? So I got a good head tilt, good nod, smiles, all the eyebrow elevation, all the positive ventral displays, or am I seeing stress induced? And so when I can put all these things together, I can really pretty rapidly assess where we're standing.
What are a couple, you're looking for that certain language. Let's just start there because I think people can get their hands on that and grasp it. What's some language you're looking for?
I'm looking for someone who, first of all, they're demonstrating interest in me. So they are really asking me what I think about things. They're asking me and exploring my experiences, my background, how I got to a certain place. Instead of trying to sell me something and tell me theirs and what's going on in their lives, they're more interested and curious about mine. So that's the first thing I'm looking for. Between that and the other thing that I think really helps a lot is empowering people with choices, gauging their comfort. So when someone says, and offers me something or wants to cooperate potentially on something, they will generally end it with a statement like, if that's something you're comfortable with, if you want to take some more time to think about it, or maybe you would like an option A, B, or C, take time to think about it. All those little add-ons there are saying it's not high pressure because people generally don't want to be sold to, but they're looking to potentially buy. And so if you demonstrate all these things, it's really emphasizing that.
What if you have pressure? You're FBI special agent, you got to pressure, you got to get this negotiation done, let's say, and there's time pressure. How are you going to build trust fast?
There's some accelerators, but the ultimate thing, one of the techniques I always talk about, my last technique in building a quick rapport is managing your expectations, because you cannot control the tempo of another person. So my definition of manipulation is any attempt of control of your actions, thoughts, deeds, or time with use of deception, subterfuge, or any lack of transparency. And so I'm always mitigating all I can through transparency. And so the best thing I can do in situations where someone's tempo of building trust might not be up to a timeline I'm on, I'm going to let them know it. I'm going to be transparent. Say, listen, I know you're probably reticent in this. We've just met. We don't have a lot of time, or you don't have a lot of time, to engage me. But here's actually what's going on behind the scenes, and you have a potential to really impact the national security of the United States, maybe our allied countries or anyone else. If you're willing to maybe take a leap of faith here, I'll make it up to you in spades anywhere I can. And most importantly, ask me anything you want, because if you leave our engagement saying to yourself, I wonder what he really wanted, I have totally failed you. So I'm hitting it all I can with full transparency, openness, honesty, and therein lies that word organic. Because when people are asking, doing those great behaviors, being transparent, demonstrating vulnerability, those are trusting behaviors.
That's true. What we found in the research, probably like you, transparency is trusted, and that's true. However, some of your kids are so transparent on social media, I don't trust you for a second, because confidentiality is also trusted. So in bringing this together you have to be sometimes confidential and you have to be transparent. How do you mix those?
I think, and you're absolutely right on that. The most important thing with that then is to be transparent about the fact that you're respecting someone's privacy, you're respecting their confidentiality. That happens a lot in the world of counterintelligence, where, if you happen upon someone that you cold call, basically, one of the common questions they'll start off is, how did you know I was here? How did you know how to get a hold of me? And if you start spilling the beans on tools and techniques that the counterintelligence world uses, that's blowing a lot of confidentiality, and even more so if maybe someone let you know they were going to be there. So all you can say is, listen, just like I would protect your privacy, I have to honor the fact that I got to protect our tools and methods and techniques of someone else's, because it's our policy to do that, just like you'd want that. Again, what am I demonstrating? Transparency on process and procedure.
Fear is a great barrier to trust. Fear in our country right now is a great barrier to trust, whether it's in, it can be in vaccines or in people or leadership, good or bad. A lot of times, how do you start to build this circle of trust? How have you done it in a team as you've led?
First of all, one of the greatest detriments to trust and that kind of paranoia that comes up is because people become insecure. And when they feel, and however this manifests itself, whether it's through media or because they're just trying to sell ad space or something, we are genetically and biologically coded to care about our safety, security, and prosperity, and a sense of control. And so what your job as a leader is to figure out who on your team might feel insecure, might feel like they're about to be kicked off the tribe. Because if you're kicked off the tribe, or fear you're going to be kicked off, all your insecurities start flaring up and all the inappropriate behaviors start flaring up. And so your job as a leader is to figure out who has insecurities that need to be quelled, and how do they, and to reassure them, no, tribe is good. Let's have a conversation about what is so we can keep moving forward together on that objective.
You talked a lot about organic trust. Anything else on really what that means to fill it out so people understand it?
The organic trust is the things that happen, and it can be by design. Like for myself, I have to by design consciously focus on other people because I'm genetically as a hardcore type A. I want to go me all in. But organic trust does come about, and you can strategize it when you focus on other people. And I think the biggest thing that I utilize for organic trust is really no expectation of reciprocity. You do for others, you demonstrate gratitude, you demonstrate that you're willing to support and offer resources without that expectation. That starts making it really organic, and it just builds that great muscle memory because our brains reward us as well when people accomplish goals and missions that we actually want to be part of for them.
When you said that, I remember one of the military academies, the commanding officer said to me, this team, these are some of the best, brightest, and bravest young men and women in America. The problem for a few of them, they think they are. And that idea, that's when we get away from gratitude, right? We get away from being grateful for it, but we built it. We're so great. And I think that's the opposite trust. One of the pieces of research that we look at is what's the most magnetic trait in the world to the most people. The most magnetic trait, it turns out, is not necessarily even a smile or a lot of things that people would expect. The most magnetic trait in first interaction tends to be gratitude.
Yeah.
We love to be around people that are grateful, right?
Yes. And my most common question I get asked is, what advice would you have for your 20-year-old self that you've learned now? And I said, this one's hands down the easiest one ever. What I didn't do when I was 20 years old, because everyone was filling my head, which didn't need any much more filling about how awesome this guy was if I had just done more of this, discovering the goals, dreams, aspirations, and priorities, and basically the job of those around me, and became a resource for them around me being successful, that's what I would have done differently. I would have, instead of trying to make myself look good, my mission should have been to be a resource for the success of others. Because again, if I had been able to focus on that third pillar I have without that expectation of reciprocity, because who wants people on their team do you want people on your team that are naturally supporting you, or then you have the ones that are supporting you because they have their own agenda for their own self-glory? Or are you looking for people that are just promoting themselves? I am looking for the ones that are there to support the team, the mission of the team. Take time to understand what the goals, priorities, and job and mission of that team are without keeping, the 5-foot focus on myself. They're actually taking time to understand the 30,000-foot level of those around them and actually supporting that mission actively, again, without that expectation of reciprocity.
So often we see this in leaders. They're doing a lot of things well, but they do one thing that breaks trust all the time. They do something, that they just don't see. They're blind to. What tip would you have for self-awareness? You just talked about self-awareness. How do people actually become aware in a way that increases humility?
So I think that there's so many, and so I'll keep it personal for myself because I know what I try to do. And that is, every time you hit a hurdle or a stumbling block or a potential door, wall, or window, whatever metaphor you want to use, that's closed, our ego will want to batter that thing down. We'll want to, some of these, type A cliches. Well, we just have to force our way through it through grit. And no, actually, that just can be really stupid. The best thing that I think a great leader can do in those moments is show humility. You take that step back, because whatever you're doing is about to fail majestically if you don't just take this step back, say to yourself, remind yourself what it is I'm trying to do and accomplish, and who do I need to have part of this team in order to make it happen. And so as soon as that leader can suspend their own sense of, I got this, take that step back, project out to the world, universe, and team around them what it is they're trying to do. Seek input, which takes humility. It takes vulnerability. It takes a sense of great personal, self-assurance and security, so that you're not insecure, that you have all the answers, and take that step back and seek thoughts, opinions, and guidance from others. Again, that number one thing you do. That's when the answers come. And they always, always come out of the direction you never would have thought in a million years. Because what's now people around you doing? They're demonstrating innovation and resilience, because by doing that great, simple thing of taking a step back and asking, you're demonstrating that you have a safe space for everyone to participate in.
Any tips around hiring, when you don't know the person yet, but you know that high trust teams are the most effective? How do I hire someone on trust? Many people would say, hire on attitude. Some would say hire on character. Well, we can't just do that if we're going to NASA. We need competency also. How do we hire on trust? How do you judge it? Or how do you judge it to lead a certain specific big project?
So I'm always looking for the most amount of transparency and self-awareness I possibly can. Even when I was soliciting people to come on my behavioral team, you have the resume, because you have to, they have to meet the certain criteria in order to be eligible, to come on the team. Then the other thing I did is I actually put names out of potential candidates to my entire team. I was looking for reputation. I was looking for not reputation of great, heart. I was looking for people that could get along with people, because you're about to form a team. I want the people that were going to be coherent with that team. And then it was my interview with the individual. And here's what I wanted to see in an interview. I didn't ask many questions. I wanted to get to know you and understand you. But what I want to do is I want to assess your self-awareness. So when I asked you what your strengths were, I wanted to hear about your strengths as you saw your strengths in terms of the team's mission and priority, not in terms of what you thought was awesome about you, but I wanted to see how you were self-aware that what you were bringing to the table for the mission. The second question is, what are your weaknesses? What I was looking for was transparency and vulnerability on what you're working on. Because here's another guarantee of all human beings. We are all working on something. If you're afraid to share it, you're too insecure or immature at that point in time, to be as high level and function as you can be. So I was looking for transparency and vulnerability and a plan you have in place every day of your life to overcome it. So because when you are willing to be transparent about the things that you suck at the worst, I can trust you to share the best. I can trust you to share things with me, because when people around you are willing to share with you because they fear nothing and they don't fear reciprocity, that now gives the leader the information they have / situational awareness to make choices, decisions to move things forward. And that creates a great circle of trust. So I was always seeking transparency.
Yeah. Any last piece of advice? Transparency, awareness, a whole lot of great work here. Any last piece of advice you'd say about building trust as a leader?
Yeah. If people can start doing these two things at least a couple times a week, if not daily, it'll start transforming how people view you and how people trust you. First thing, seek the greatness in others. As I said already, we're all working on something. If you give yourself a negative confirmation bias, always looking for what people are doing wrong, you're always going to see what people are doing wrong. Find their greatness, because if you want to have a great conversation or even a challenging conversation, start by validating you see their greatness. The second thing you do is keep identifying their priorities, those needs, wants, dreams, and aspirations, personal, professional, long-term, short-term. If you focus on understanding what the priorities of those around you are, it now gives you that ability to be a resource for their success. You do those two simple things, and you don't even have to start doing anything. You just be more observant, and you'll be able to take better actions.
Wow. Excellent advice, Robin. Thank you for your service to our country, for your service to freedom, and to your service to our audience and to trusted leaders, being a part of the trust movement in our country and world. And thanks for sharing your insights today on the Trusted Leader Webcast.
It was my honor, and thank you so much for including me. It's humbling.
Thank you.
How fascinating was that? Wow. Thank you, Robin, for sharing your experience and insight with us. At this time, I'd like to welcome our man David back to share pillars 5 through 8. David, take it away.
So we know a lack of trust is our biggest expense. Everything of value is built on trust. Trust is always the root cause and the leading indicator. We know there are 8 pillars to become a trusted leader. We looked at the first 4. It's time for pillar number 5, commitment. We trust those that stay committed even in the face of adversity. Think of anybody that's left a legacy in your life or in history, your mom or dad, your first grade teacher, Mandela, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, Jesus, or Joan of Arc, and you'll find somebody that was trusted in part because they were committed to something beyond themselves, maybe to death. Commitment breeds commitment. Think about if you get something tattooed on your body, you got to be committed, right? What's the number one asked for tattoo in America? The number one requested commercial tattoo, not mom or a heart. Number one commercial tattoo in America, Harley Davidson. It turns out Harley riders are committed. Not only will they get it tattooed on their body, they'll wear the clothes. They'll show up in Milwaukee. Over 250,000 of them will show up in Sturgis, South Dakota during COVID. Harley riders are committed. Was it always that way? No. In 1981, when the new ownership took over this fledgling kind of tanking little motorcycle company that really should have been wiped off the map of American history, they said, we're going to make 2 commitments. Number 1, we're going to be committed to quality again. Number 2, we're going to be absolutely committed to our favorite first-time buyer, who they defined at the time as the yuppie that wants to look like a renegade on the weekend. And they stayed committed. And commitment bred commitment. And commitment bred more commitment. And the return was significant. If you would have put $1 in Harley Davidson stock in the 25 years back from when I did my original research, you would have put it in one of the top 25 American stocks, and like only a few, Berkshire Hathaway, Microsoft, and a few others, your dollar would have appreciated by nearly 18,000%. Commitment breeds commitment. It starts with you. The number one action that would increase retention, keeping promises. You know, this is interesting because often people in this pillar ask me, David, how do you rebuild trust once you've lost it? You even said you're not perfect at any of this, and that is certainly true. We've all lost it. We've all made mistakes. How do you rebuild trust? Well, I can tell you what it's not. Apologizing. I'm not saying you don't need to apologize to open the door of communication. I still remember this. A CEO came to America from the Netherlands. We became friends. I asked him after being here a couple weeks, hey, what's the first thing you notice in America? And he said, you want to know the truth, David? You got a bunch of lying apologizers. They all say they're sorry to me and they don't mean it. I'm sorry I'm late. No, you're late every single day. We don't ever rebuild trust on the apology. It doesn't mean we don't need to apologize to open the door of communication, but the only way to rebuild trust, whether you're a big company or an individual, is to make and keep a new commitment. You have to show it authentically. I still think about this. You know, you might have heard the idea, love your neighbor as yourself. Well, what's that mean? Think about someone who doesn't love themselves at all. How fun are they to be around? Not very. It's the same with trust. If you don't make and keep commitments to yourself, you have a hard time trusting yourself or believing anybody else is trustworthy, and you have a hard time building trust in your team and your organization. I still remember I was asked to speak at a pretty big event, 5,000 people or so at the Gaylord in Washington, D.C., and I'm backstage, and the person that hired me, he was the new senior vice president of sales, and he had read the first book that I wrote. It was this part about commitment. He said, I love that part about commitment. Can you just go out there and tell my team to be committed to me? No. You've got to be committed to them first. And I watched this brand new SVP walk on stage and inauthentically read off the teleprompter and lose his audience that day because of a lack of commitment they could feel a mile away. Your people can tell if you're committed to them, and commitment breeds commitment. One way of looking at this might be, what are we absolutely committed to? And maybe as important of a question is, what are we absolutely committed to saying no to? One of the most important questions of leadership is not the yes, it's the no. If you're not good at saying no to things, if you're not good at being committed to say no, you'll never have room for the right yeses. The fifth pillar is commitment. Sixth pillar of the greatest leaders and organizations of all time is connection. The willingness to connect and collaborate. You know, each of these pillars has counterforces. So if we go into an organization, we see a lot of siloing or a lot of arrogance, we know we might have a lack of connection. Collaboration is the number one motivation for persevering on a project. There are many ways we can connect and collaborate. We can connect with people using story, transparency, vulnerability, collaborative efforts. One of the statistics that stood out from last year's Trust Outlook study was 92% of leaders would be more trusted if they were more transparent about their mistakes. Not just transparent, it turns out we connect as individuals on our mistakes more than, hey, I won this, I got this big trophy, I was All-State, I had this challenge, I had that challenge. And I often see this imposter syndrome, scared to death to share anything anybody's done wrong, and what happens? Nobody has their back. Nobody trusts them. By the way, that statistic hit me over the head. I still remember, my daughter, my oldest daughter is in college now, but she was, I think, 13 or something when we went on this walk, and she looked up at me and she said, "Dad, you wouldn't understand. I don't know if this was about boys or grades. You wouldn't understand because you're perfect." And while that might sound sweet, that's a big problem. It might have been fine at 3 years old to be their hero, but if they're not seeing something else at 13, huge problem. Now, funny enough, my wife, all the other kids, my team, they can all see the challenges, but she had at this time not seen how I blew it buying a company and losing everything for our family before she was born. She didn't see that I was traveling more in those days, and she would see me get picked up in an airplane or a sedan or something, and she didn't see everything. They travel with me to these big events. So I made an intention. Every week we'd go for a walk. I just started sharing with her ways I blew it. In life, maybe that day, ways I blew it. How did I do this wrong? I did that wrong. I shared some of those things, and what happened? It just changed our relationship forever. If they don't know you, they'll never bring their problems to you. This is work for leaders, to be transparent about your mistakes, but I've sat next to presidents of countries and presidents of companies, scared to death to share. When they share a little bit, they start to be humanized. They start to be seen as real. People start to have their back. Of course, with each of these ideas, there is tension and trust as far as being transparent, but confidential with the right things. I'm not saying any of this is easy. I'm just saying it's true from what we've seen. So we're going to do one exercise right now, and there are many we could do under this pillar, but one exercise that has been enormously powerful. We've used this next exercise on pro sports teams and university teams. We've used it in boardrooms and with senior executives. It's called the trust shield. And the paradox of the shield is a shield protects, right? And often, the interesting piece of it is the more you know yourself and the more you share that with others, like your team, the more your team will protect you. There are two sides of the shield, and we're going to show how we do this around the world. I'm going to start with just kind of a Euro-looking shield, but we'll get to some others. In fact, I'll show them now. We've got the Kenyan, East African shield that they chose there, and this is a university dean that made his shield this way, and we've got a shield where someone just wanted to put pictures in. We've got the fire chiefs that create the shield, and they kind of do it in their way, and we've got a kind of creative shield. You can make this shield any way fits for you. But there are 8 parts of the shield, and there are 2 big wins. The first, like Socrates said, know yourself, right? If you're going to lead yourself, know yourself. If you're going to be a trusted leader, it starts with leading yourself. So first, you can go to page 202 in the book, Trusted Leader, take a big white piece of paper and just draw a shield any way you want. Make sure there are 8 areas. Take 10, 20 minutes. If you're doing this in teams, take 10 or 20 minutes of silent time and just write, draw pictures to fill in this shield. Take it seriously. You might think this is a little kindergarten. It's not. I've had a CEO say, for the last 20 years, I've built missions and I've built values for companies. I've never spent the time to look at myself. This changed me. So you're going to fill in 8 areas. The first area is background. Take some time. What were your tipping points in life? What were your biggest challenges? When did you get made fun of? What were you esteemed for? Many, many things can change us. I used to be a lifeguard, and yet at 20 years old, I almost drowned. And that changed me, gave me claustrophobia. And it changes every day for me that I get on an airplane. I'm affected by something that happened years ago. Take a look at your background for a few minutes. Then go to values. You see that values, that's the decision-making values we talked about. The values that you've decided you're going to make every decision by as a leader. That's not your life priorities, that's next. Life priorities are what you value in life. Maybe it's faith or family or friendships. You can put that on the right-hand side. And the next area is mission, right? What's your mission in life? What do you hope to be about? You might start that mission in one sentence with the word to. To be this, to do that. My mission in life is to do this. Then look at your strengths. People have told you things you're great at. Don't be shy. What are some strengths? What are some opportunities? What are some things you'd like to do better? That's the next area of the shield, areas of improvement. What do you hope to improve on? It's great to focus at your strengths, but you might have a few things you want to get a little bit better at. Life goals is the 7th area of the shield. Remember, goals are something you accomplish. A mission you never really accomplish. You keep just being about that in life. But life goals, what are some things you hope to accomplish in life? You hope to do before you leave this earth, right? Finally, number 8, you're gone today. What's the legacy you left? What were you really about? What did people say about you when you're gone? What legacy did you leave? 8 areas. Take some time to think through them. Take some time to know yourself. That's the first step. You can pause the video right now and take some time to do it. The second step of the Trust Shield exercise is share it with others. Share it with your team. One of those university football teams, the coach said this exercise was a big part of gelling them. In fact, they went from 3-7 to 7-3 regular season, doing some trust work, and this was one of those things. At the beginning of the season, every single player created and shared their shield. Coaches. Then they created modified shields for position groups, and then a shield as a team. Share this shield. Share it around your leadership team. Maybe just take 3 minutes each, 5 minutes each. We don't want to have any psychological manipulation or push that sharing things you shouldn't or don't feel like sharing. Not everything should maybe be transparent, but I would push you. Share a little more than you feel like. You'll see you're not so different from everybody else. You'll see people might even come around you. Find a way to share this in your organization, in your family. It's interesting, shields like this have been around for hundreds of years. They give representation about what we're supposed to be about. There's family crests and there's city shields and government shields, and even in Romans had shields that showed kind of the regimen they came from. It's supposed to kind of tell a story of what you're about. It's the precursor to the modern day logo. Take some time to know yourself a little more, and then share it with others, and you'll see that shield just might protect you by building stronger connection that leads to greater trust. The seventh pillar of the greatest leaders and organizations of all time, those that are trusted leaders, the seventh pillar is contribution. We trust those that contribute results. In fact, the number one word that came out of this research funnel was results, performance, outcomes. We trust people that actually get something done, do what we expected. This is where the work happens. It's easy to just have compassion and not get anything done. We've got to contribute results. That surgeon might be the most compassionate, high character I ever met, but if I'm going in for amputation and the surgeon cuts off the wrong leg, we have a problem. You've got to contribute results. Doing, not saying, builds trust. So, there are two sides of this contribution pillar. The first side is me. I've got to contribute results. I've got to contribute results, but I have to have all 8 pillars. So this is the truth about the pillars. They were relatively co-equal. You could just get results, not have compassion, character, and lose trust. You could just have compassion and character, not get results, and lose trust. You have to have all 8 pillars to really be a trusted leader. As imperfect as we are, we have to seek to build all 8. Two sides of this contribution of results pillar. First side is me getting results myself. I have to contribute results, but not at the expense of the other pillars, not at the expense of relationships and people like some of the productivity books teach. And secondly, we have to try to motivate results in our team. In this short time together, let me just give you a quick 6E process for motivating results in your team. The first E is example. We're motivated by example. I remember that first organization. I took over the leadership, didn't know anybody. I told my wife, Lisa, for the first year, I've got to be the first one in and the last one to leave to show my commitment in kind of a foreign land. And little by little, they started to trust me. The second E is expectation. It turns out we're motivated to deliver results based on expectation. We know if you expect great things, you might get them. If you expect terrible things, you're certain to get them. The third E is education, training and development. That's that Chick-fil-A story of my pleasure, right? Education. When I learned exactly what was inside of a hot dog, I stopped eating so many. Education can motivate different results. Number 4 is encouragement. We talked about that a lot under the compassion pillar and the SPA method of encouraging others, but don't forget it. It's a way that we can motivate results. The 5th E is empowerment. There are 2 big sides of this E, empowerment. The first side you get quickly, right? It's very demotivating to be told to do something and not empowered with the resources to do that. Absolutely. The second side of empowerment is where I see a whole lot of lazy leadership. Many leaders will go into a relatively co-equal team and say, take one person aside and say, you got this project, I believe in you, you're going to do a great job. And that leader feels like they did a good job when it was lazy leadership. What ought they do? Publicly bestow, empower their leadership on whoever they choose to lead that project. Hey, Jill, you got this project. Everybody on the same page here? She's going to be leader of this project. Everybody's going to have her back. We're in this together, but Jill is going to lead. That's empowering leadership. Why do leaders avoid that? Because if they just tell Jill privately, they don't have to take any responsibility for the downside. And they can all take all the credit for the upside. But a trusted leader empowers publicly and cheers the wins and takes the downside along with the person they empower. The 6th E is extending trust to others. Now, there's a whole lot of wisdom and discernment that goes with this pillar because you can, in fact, extend too much. Think of where kids are concerned or healthcare or certain things. But I would argue this. You can almost always extend more trust to your team, to your people, maybe even to your kids, and you will get more good out of them. The seventh pillar, contribution. The final pillar of the greatest leaders and organizations of all time, consistency. We trust sameness. I might not like McDonald's, but I trust them. I've had the same exact burger on 6 continents. This is why we can't, stand moody people. What are you going to be like today? Happy, sad, mad, crabby? It stresses me out. I would rather have an angry curmudgeon on my team every single day because I can manage sameness. Consistency is the only way to build a reputation as a leader, sameness, and consistency is the only way to build a brand as an organization. I have to have the same experience over time. Remember, if you're late all the time, I will in fact trust you to be late. Sameness, consistency is trusted. For good or bad, if you only have character when the lights are on, that's not really trusted character. If you're only compassionate with people that look like you or believe like you, that's not really compassion. Consistency is queen and king. Sameness is trusted. In our office, we have a sign up. This is the quote. It's the little things done consistently that make the biggest difference, not the big things. If I'm overweight, it's because I've had too many scoops of ice cream over time, not because I ate too much this morning for breakfast. If I'm a good husband, it's because I've loved and honored my wife over years, not because I gave her that big bouquet or that ring one time, not that that wouldn't help. If I'm a good leader, I'm consistently sharing the little things. But people say, I shared the vision at the annual meeting. If you're not sharing the vision and values every 21 days, nobody knows them, so they're not living by them. Consistency is the power behind trust. Consistency wins. In every single interaction, we increase or decrease trust. The way you talk to your kids this morning at breakfast, they trust you a little bit more or a little bit less. I sadly watched 2 friends, CEO and board chair, and they had been friends, gone on vacation together. The CEO had been relatively consistent until one day, in one board meeting, he got so angry, he threw a clipboard across the boardroom, and he lost trust. And from that day on, not only did the board chair leave, not just as board chair, but as friend, no one would ever share bad news with that CEO again. And that was the beginning of the end for that company. You increase or decrease trust with every interaction. This is a very good friend of mine, Kevin Ridgway. As you can see, we're different in a couple big ways. This picture was taken January 12th, 2017. He was a master's level bodybuilding competitor in his life. The picture was taken the day before his vehicle was hit by a Land Rover that squashed him inside of his vehicle. The surgeon said he would have died immediately except for the muscle mass on his chest. He went into a coma right away. They said he would never wake up from one. If he did, he'd have brain damage. 5.5 weeks later, Kevin woke up without brain damage. I got to get a picture the first day he could stand up just for a few moments. You don't see the metal braces behind him in this picture. The first day he could stand up, 66 days later. And in 66 days, Kevin had lost 66 pounds. What's the message for you and me? This is no fault of Kevin's, but for you and I, atrophy is guaranteed without intentional action. You've got to keep putting the right things in. You've got to keep putting the right trust building, the trust vitamins in if you're going to keep a culture of trust. You have 2 things against you. Time, people forget, and change. So if you want to have a culture of trust, you have to keep at it. You know, it's true on the farm and it's true in life. Healthy things grow and sick things die. Healthy cows grow, healthy corn grows. Sick corn and cows die, but it's the same with churches. Healthy churches grow, sick ones become divided. Healthy marriages grow, sick ones become divorced. Healthy organizations grow in some way, and sick ones die in some way unless you put the right things in. So let's get personal before we close up this pillar. What I've seen in the most trusted leaders, whether running hundreds of billion-dollar organizations, countries, or even small entrepreneurial but impactful shops, they are thinking about self-leadership before they think about global leadership. We know that organizations don't change, countries don't change, companies don't change, only individuals change. But when an individual changes, then an organization, a country can change, right? I mean, if we're dealing with corruption issues, we need a police officer to change. If we're dealing with our own leadership, we need to change. So here's a little idea. What we found in leaders that have actually been able to make changes, they've planted and cultivated their seeds first. A whole lot of people, they get all excited in New Year's or they go to some big motivational speak and they don't do anything differently unless they've planted and cultivated their seeds. The S stands for sleep. You gotta get some. You know, many of us leaders, we're kind of arrogant about this, aren't we? I haven't slept. I only slept 3 hours last night. Oh, I haven't slept for 7 weeks. No, you need sleep. Waistlines, anger levels, everything changes when you get the right amount of sleep. The first E is exercise. Now, I'm not going to start running marathons like my wife, but what I did learn is to move just a little bit more, and it changed my leadership. The next E is way more important. That's eat right. You know, when I started losing the weight, I had a doctor say a few things to me that were really important. One, he said, David, you want to drive a junker or a Ferrari? Because we put different fuel in a Ferrari. And I had to think about, what am I putting in? Then he said, you can't outrun a cheeseburger. What do you mean? He showed me the calories in the biggest Wendy's meal, I believe it was. It was the biggest double burger with the biggest fries with the biggest Coke. That meal, 2,200 calories. If I get on a treadmill, can I burn 500, maybe 800 in a whole hour if I have a whole hour? I can't outrun the cheeseburger. He said, many of you that kind of used to be athletes, you just think you can just, 40s, 50s, you just start working out again. You are 85% what you put in, 15% exercise. You've got to put in different fuel. So I had to think about, what does that mean for me? And I'm not an expert. I'm not telling you what to have. I know for me, I got to make sure I get 4 green vegetables in a day and some other things. But like everything, input leads to output. The D stands for drink water. Turns out we're mostly made of it. Many people drink almost everything but water. I make sure I drink like 1.5 gallons a day almost. The final S stands for source of strength. Here's what we found. I'm not telling you where to have a source of strength, who to have a source of strength from. I am telling you what we've seen. And that is leaders that don't have a source of strength beyond their work, beyond their business, they're worse in their work, business, or ministry. I still remember this as a kid. You know, when you're a Minnesota boy growing up in the 70s, 80s, you got to find another football team after our few great years. Never won a Super Bowl, as most of you know, but you got to find another team. So for me, growing up, the Dallas Cowboys. I love to watch the team, but I love to watch that leader, legendary coach Tom Landry. Super Bowl winning, just what a guy. I still remember this one Sunday. A reporter sticks a microphone in this gentleman's face after a game. What is it with you, Tom Landry, Coach Landry? All the other coaches, if they win, they're all excited and happy. If they lose, they swear at me. They're all mad. But you, doesn't matter. You win or lose, you don't even seem like you care. You're the same every time, whether you win or lose. What is your problem? And on national television, the great Tom Landry looked at the young reporter and said, I don't know. I think it might be because I have my priorities in order. For me, faith comes first, family after that, friends after that. If I lose on Sunday, I got a whole lot left over. All I can say is, I've sat next to leaders that are so alone at the top. After they're done at the top, they'll have nothing else. And the great leaders have a source of strength beyond themselves, friends, family, faith, something. So, to start leading yourself, you might just consider, have you planted your seeds? And you might come back to it. When I get out of balance a little bit, I come back to this little exercise and think, okay, oh, not sleeping enough. Oh, eating wrong. There we are. Case for trust, an 8-pillar framework. Now, I hope without any ego, but a whole lot of research and work on 6 continents, I believe you can solve every organizational and leadership issue against these 8. It doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean I know it all or can do it perfectly. I just know these are the real issues. One of the big problems with this work, people know I want to help organizations, governments, leaders be the most trusted in their industry. But is it better to be trusted or trustworthy? Well, the problem is you can manipulate these pillars to look trusted without actually being worthy of it. When you really become a trusted leader, you actually become trustworthy. You can use these pillars to solve your biggest challenges because trust is always the root issue. And when you build these pillars in your own life, you'll become an even more trusted leader.
So to take the next step on the trusted leader journey, we're gonna ask a few things of you. Number one, if you love today, we encourage you to purchase the book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble and dive deeper into this rich content. Number two, write a review about Trusted Leader and the impact the content has had on your life and your leadership. Let's show David some love. And 3, lastly, go to trustedleaderbook.com and consider buying a book for your team and the company. There's an easy way to do all of this on the site. And if you could do all of that by April 3rd, we would truly appreciate it. Thank you from all of us. And David, thank you for all that you poured out for these leaders today. I can only imagine how many trusted leaders will come from all the words that you shared with us today.
Thank you, Sojo. And thank you. This has been fun.
It has.
Yeah. Thank you to all of you for listening, for caring, for helping us in this movement to create more trusted leaders.